Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the candlelit world of a 15th century Ethiopian scribe. Picture it, the cold breath of the highlands curls around your ankles before the sun even thinks about showing up. The sky is still the color of slate, and the air smells like incense, morning dew, and maybe just a little regret from skipping dinner last night. Somewhere far off, monks are chanting in Gizi, their voices bouncing off stone walls like echoes from another century. And you? You're blinking sleep out of your eyes, wrapping a rough cotton shawl around your shoulders, and wondering how many goats were involved in today's parchment. Just a heads up, you probably won't survive this day without at least one ink stain in an inappropriate place and a minor existential crisis about whether you're spelling Gabriel wrong. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake just before the first light breaks the horizon. Not because of any alarm or wake-up call, but because you've been conditioned by years of rhythm. Prayers at dawn, work until dusk, and rest only when your fingers ache too much to write another line. The chill in the air wraps around you like a wet cloth. Ethiopian highlands are no joke at this hour. You're up at over 7,000 feet, and the stone walls around you do little to hold in warmth. Your cotton robe feels stiff and cold as you sit up, still groggy, your joints clicking like an old door hinge. You swing your legs over the edge of your straw mat and roll your shoulders. Above, the roof timbers creak softly as the first bird calls ring out. A pair of thick-billed ravens arguing over something dumb, probably. You can't see them, but you've heard that argument enough times to know how it ends. Feathers and wounded pride. Your little cell is barely wide enough to stretch out in. One clay lamp still flickers low, casting a buttery glow on the cracked walls. You've scratched a few personal marks into the stone above your sleeping mat. One of them looks like a star, another like a cross, and the one you definitely didn't mean to carve looks suspiciously like a chicken. You toss on your extra wool wrap, still stiff with last week's campfire smoke, and shuffle to the doorway. Outside your cell, the monastery is quiet except for the soft murmur of monks waking. You pass down the narrow hall, tracing your fingertips along the cool stone. You always walk the corridor barefoot in the mornings. Something about feeling the earth makes you believe the day will go more smoothly. It never actually does. But tradition is tradition. You head first to the cistern, a squat, round stone basin at the center of the lower courtyard. The water's surface reflects a few pale stars still hanging on in the early sky. You splash some onto your face and rub the sleep from your eyes. It's freezing and you gasp aloud, waking up in earnest. A few other scribes are here too. One of them, Abatoma, grunts a sleepy his beard already damp with splashback. He always looks like he lost an argument with a mountain lion, and he always smells faintly of cloves. He nods at you and says, "If you don't dream of demons, you didn't study hard enough the day before." You arch an eyebrow. And if I dreamed of two demons arguing over an ink pot? That's just Tuesday, he says and shuffles off. You finish washing up and head back inside. Time to gather your tools. Your desk in the scriptorium is cluttered but loved. There's a bundle of quills, a bone-handled knife for sharpening, a sliver of pumice stone for smoothing parchment, and a small clay pot of ink you mixed yesterday from soot, gum arabic, and water from the river that smells slightly like fish. Some scribes swear by gall ink made from tree galls, but you don't trust anything harvested from a bug's house. Also, gall ink stains your fingers for days and smells like sadness. Today's task: continue your copy of the Gospel of Luke. You've been working on it for months. It's not just a book, it's a miracle in progress. Each page is written with deliberate precision in the classical Gezi script, with decorative borders that coil and twine like vines from heaven, or very tidy spaghetti. Illumination is the hardest part. You're no master artist, but you can fake it well enough. Your angel wings always look a little too symmetrical, though. One scribe, Brother Menlik, once muttered that your Archangel Michael looked like he was trying too hard. You still haven't forgiven him. You unwrap your parchment for the day, goatskin, pale and buttery. You spent a full day last week stretching it with pegs and scraping it with a crescent blade until it was smooth enough to kiss. Not that you'd kiss it. Not again, anyway. Before you dip your pen, you murmur a quick prayer. May my hand be guided, my lines be true, and may I not knock over my ink again. Last week's disaster still haunts your dreams. Half a page soaked, 3 hours lost, and a lecture from the abbot that might have included the phrase, worse than Roman invaders. You begin writing. The first line is smooth, the ink flowing well. The room is silent except for the scratching of pens, the occasional cough, and the one monk who insists on humming softly when he concentrates. It's not a bad hum, really, more like a tune trying to remember itself. Time slows here. You fall into a rhythm, your hand moving steadily. Occasionally, you pause to fix a mistake with a tiny blade, scraping off the ink and smoothing the spot over. One of the younger scribes, barely 14 and already hopelessly arrogant, asks you what you do if the parchment tears. You look him dead in the eye and say, "We bury it and pretend it never happened." He doesn't laugh. You're not joking. Outside the window, sunlight spills over the mountaintop. The highlands glow golden and green, the mist rising in slow swirls like the land is stretching. The view is ridiculous, like someone painted it just for you. But you can't stare long. You have work to do, and the abbot has eyes in the back of his head. Probably borrowed them from a saint. You pause to flex your fingers. Your knuckles crack. You remember your father telling you that scribes were like warriors. Only instead of bleeding, they got sore backs and better handwriting. Back in the day, he said, scribes were chosen for their discipline, not their talent. Anyone can learn to copy. But to copy without question, without embellishment, with humility? That's rare. Humility isn't your strong suit, but you fake it better than most. Your stomach growls. You fish a piece of dried fig from your sleeve pocket. Not the freshest, but it's enough to quiet the beast within for another hour. A sudden gust of wind rattles the window panes, and a few specks of dust spiral down from the rafters. You glance up and smile. There's a pigeon up there, a regular. You've named him Zara Jacob after the emperor. He's nosy, judgmental, and frequently full of droppings. But he watches you work, and somehow that makes you feel visible. Historians still argue whether scribes in medieval Ethiopia were more valued for their theological discipline or their artistic talent. The truth is probably both. What's also true is that someone, centuries from now, might hold your copy of Luke and wonder who you were, what you thought, and if you were hungry when you wrote the word fish 3 times in a row. You get back to work. The scriptorium smells of ink, parchment, and the faint breath of garlic from someone's breakfast you didn't get to eat. You think of the day ahead, of letters yet to form, of pages yet to fill, of secrets yet to write. You shuffle out of the scriptorium with the others, rubbing your aching hand and blinking at the sudden brightness. The sun is climbing now, painting everything gold and white, and the mountain air is warming just enough to peel the frost from the roof tiles. You step into the courtyard and roll your shoulders with a satisfying series of cracks. One of the younger scribes winces at the noise and mutters, "You sound like an old scroll unrolling." You glare at him, then admit he's not wrong. Time for mid-morning prayers. You and the others move toward the chapel, an ancient structure built right into the side of the mountain. Its thick, curved walls are smeared with soot and incense residue, and its doors are scarred with years of weather, elbows, and overzealous monks. The inside is dim and smoky. Beeswax candles burn in iron sconces, their light barely penetrating the cavernous space. But it smells divine: frankincense, old stone, and the lingering sweetness of spiced oil from last night's vigil. You file into place near the back, your usual spot. You like it here. You can see everything, breathe easier, and avoid being pulled into the front row where the abbot might ask theological questions you're not awake enough to answer. The chant begins, low, melodic syllables rolling from the monks at the front. You join in, your voice blending into the sea of sound, steady but subdued. It's more vibration than volume, and you let it wrap around you like wool. And this is where your day finds its rhythm. The scriptorium is your body, but the chapel is your breath. After prayers, you sneak back toward your chamber for a short break, not entirely sanctioned, but hey, you haven't knocked over your ink in a week. You've earned 5 minutes of questionable behavior. On the way, you pass through a side corridor lined with old murals. They're faded, cracked in places, but still vividly alive. Saints with wide eyes, angels with swords that defy physics, and a particularly jarring depiction of the devil. He looks like a half-melted goat with too many teeth. You always walk faster past that one. Back in your cell, you sit on your mat and stretch your legs out in front of you. Your knees protest. Your ankles pop. You stare at the ceiling and let your thoughts drift. You wonder how long this manuscript will take to finish. Another few months, maybe. Maybe longer. If your ink supply holds, if the goats don't get sick again, if the parchment master doesn't decide to redo quality control and inspect your vellum with his fingernails. You groan just thinking about it. Outside, a bell rings twice. Sharp, clear, and a little too smug. That's your signal. You're not getting away with this break after all. You make your way to the side courtyard where the Abbey's head illuminator is setting up for his lecture on border embellishment. That's today's session, mandatory, of course. Not that anyone asked whether you wanted to spend your precious morning being told that your vines lack spiritual geometry. But here we are. The illuminator, Abba Dawit, stands under a woven canopy with a pile of worn-out scrolls and paint pots at his feet. He's wrapped in a robe so white it's probably been bleached with divine judgment. He clears his throat like he's about to deliver news of a celestial coup. "We will begin," he says, "by examining symmetry in the Book of Enoch." Groans. Subtle ones. Internal ones. You assume a facial expression best described as devout suffering. He unrolls an old manuscript, its pages bordered with intricate red and gold designs, twisting flora, mythical beasts, the occasional disapproving cherub. The detail is mind-numbing. You imagine the poor scribe who had to paint each of those feathers. Probably died mid-wing. You see, Abba Dawit continues, true art reflects divine order. Even a simple spiral must emerge from prayerful contemplation. Someone coughs. You try not to sigh audibly. Still, you have to admit, some of it's useful. He demonstrates how to create depth using only 2 pigments and a blade for scraping highlights. And he shows how mistakes can be disguised with clever layering, something you plan to use immediately, since your last manuscript has a blot that currently resembles a very sinful potato. He ends the session by reminding everyone to recite a psalm before beginning their next illuminated margin. Apparently, even angels need proofreading. You file out with the others. One of them, a soft-spoken scribe named Tesfaye, leans over and whispers, "His cherubs always look like they smelled something bad." You snort and immediately pretend it was a sneeze. Back in the scriptorium, the light has shifted. Sunlight slices through the windows at a new angle, catching dust motes midair. You settle in and pick up where you left off. Luke, chapter 9. Today's passage describes the Transfiguration, a radiant moment. You know what the illumination needs: a dazzling golden halo, the mountain behind Jesus shimmering with sacred fire. You carefully begin sketching the outlines in pencil-thin charcoal. You'll ink later, once you're confident. The gold leaf is stored in the apothecary's room and only issued by permission, which means groveling, and paperwork, and possibly bribing someone with your last fig. As you draw, a fly lands on your wrist. You wave it off. It returns. You wave again. It returns. You curse its ancestors silently. It finally retreats to hover near Brother Menlich's head, which is fair punishment for yesterday's insult. You glance around. The other scribes are hunched over their work, silent. Some hum. One is quietly weeping over a torn page. Another is scratching out a word with the tip of his knife like he's shaving the devil's beard. This is the heart of your world. A dozen scribes, each laboring not for fame or fortune but for preservation, for devotion, for something bigger than any of you. These books will outlive you. These pages might travel to cities you'll never see, Gondar, Lalibela, even Cairo or Jerusalem. There's a kind of immortality in that, a quiet one. You glance at your own handwriting. It's crisp, but you've gotten better. You think. You hope. But every now and then, you spot the flicker of doubt. Was that aleph supposed to be taller? Did you curve that mem too tightly? Did you spell glory with one or two strokes on the final consonant? Historians still argue whether Ethiopian scribes in this era worked from strict exemplar manuscripts or whether they had interpretive leeway. Some believe there were master copies, always followed to the letter. Others argue that regional variation was expected, even welcomed. You lean toward the second group, mostly because it gives you plausible deniability when you improvise. By late morning, your ink is drying too fast. The air has warmed. You carefully seal your pot and rise, stretching your arms above your head. You make your way to the apothecary for more supplies, hoping, praying, that he's in a good mood. The apothecary is a narrow, chaotic room that smells like a love letter to mildew. Shelves bulge with jars, roots, powders, feathers, dried petals, and one very suspicious taxidermied cat. You greet the keeper, Abba Johannes, part alchemist, part gossip magnet. "Need more ink?" he asks, not even looking up from a bowl he's grinding something in. "And gold leaf," you add casually. He snorts. "Transfiguration?" You nod. He eyes you like you just requested the bones of Saint Tekel Hamana, then sighs and hands over a single square of gold so thin it flutters like a moth's wing. "Try not to drop it," he mutters. "Last time someone did, we didn't find it for weeks." Turned up in the abbot's teacup. You thank him and leave, delicately carrying the treasure back toward your desk. The monastery bell rings again, longer this time. The call for the midday meal. Your stomach grumbles like it's been plotting a mutiny all morning. You hesitate. Just one more line? You tuck your tools away and roll up your work carefully. Even scripture has to wait when your body starts threatening to faint from hunger. As you step outside, you squint into the sun, which now hovers directly overhead. The shadows are gone, the courtyard is full of warm stone light, and for a moment, the world feels perfectly balanced, just like the margins in your manuscript. The scent of lentils hits you before you even reach the refectory, warm, thick, and unmistakably earthy, like someone cooked prayer and dirt together in a cauldron. Which, honestly, isn't too far off. You walk with the others through the arched corridor leading to the meal hall, sunlight spilling through the narrow slit windows and warming the flagstones underfoot. Your stomach growls with such drama that the scribe behind you chuckles and offers you half a dried date. You take it with exaggerated gratitude. It tastes like sugar-soaked bark. A true gift. Inside the refectory, the benches are already filling up. Rows of long, worn wooden tables stretch beneath the high vaulted ceiling. The light bounces off the plastered walls, which are painted with geometric patterns and faded saints watching you like disappointed parents. You slide into your usual seat next to Tesfaye, who has already secured 2 pieces of flatbread and is carefully trying to balance a spoon on his nose. He nods solemnly when you sit. "I'm trying to master divine equilibrium," he says. "You'll master divine mockery first," you reply, snatching one of his flatbreads without asking. The midday meal is simple but filling: lentils spiced with garlic and berbera, unleavened bread made fresh this morning, and a warm barley drink with a texture somewhere between soup and something you don't ask too many questions about. You eat quickly, letting the food settle your nerves and slow the jitter of your ink-stained hands. A monk reads scripture aloud from the front of the room. Today, it's a passage from the Book of Jubilees. His voice is steady, almost hypnotic. You chew slowly, letting the words blur into the cadence of chewing and breathing and not being bent over a manuscript for a change. It's a moment of peace, bracketed by ink and expectation. As you sop up the last of the lentils with your bread, you glance around the room. Some of the younger boys are struggling to stay awake. One is full-on snoring into his plate. Another is trying to sketch something under the table, probably a lion that looks like a goat. Classic mistake. You did the same thing once and got a stern correction from a monk who told you that if lions don't look majestic, God might take it personally. After the meal, there's cleanup. Everyone does their part. You rinse your bowl in a long stone trough behind the hall and dry it on a shared cloth that smells like 1,000 other meals. You can hear a bell ringing faintly from the outer courtyard. It's the signal for midday chores. Today, you've been assigned one of the better ones, sorting parchment sheets in the drying room. Not glamorous, but it beats goat duty. Last week's goat duty included chasing one particularly vengeful animal named Asmara who has an unhealthy taste for quill feathers. You head toward the drying room, housed in a long stone outbuilding near the outer wall of the monastery. Inside, the air is cool and dry. Sheets of freshly scraped parchment are stretched on wooden frames, some already beginning to curl at the edges. You walk among them slowly, inspecting each for texture, thickness, and blemishes. A few are too veiny. One has a tear-you circle in charcoal. Another is perfect, smooth as silk, pale as ivory, like it was peeled from an angel's diary. You sort them into piles: ready, questionable, discard. Each decision is a tiny judgment. Not every goatskin is worthy of scripture. Some are only fit for record-keeping or notes. Others get recycled into test sheets for pen trials and ink tests. The hierarchy of parchment is surprisingly brutal. While you work, a novice named Endel hovers nearby, watching. He asks if you think parchment making is a divine skill or just messy alchemy. You pause, running your fingers along a particularly good sheet. "Maybe both," you say. "It takes divine patience and unholy amounts of goat hair." He laughs, then asks if you've ever made your own. You shake your head. I'm a scribe, not a butcher. Historians still argue whether scribes in the 15th century were expected to understand the full parchment-making process. He says, repeating something he obviously read in the library. You raise an eyebrow. Historians argue about everything, especially things they've never had to scrape with a blunt knife at dawn. He seems satisfied with that and leaves you to your sorting. Once the stacks are arranged, you carry the ready pile back toward the scriptorium storage chamber, a small, locked room guarded like it contains treasure, which, to be fair, it kind of does. Inside are shelves of vellum and parchment, sealed ink jars, powdered pigments, styluses, and a few rare scrolls kept under linen wraps. The key holder, a serious monk named Abba Caleb, lets you in with a grunt and an expression that suggests he's constantly disappointed in your posture. You place the stack carefully on a shelf, noting your initials on the corner sheet. Every contribution is logged. Every tool accounted for. Even the chalk is rationed like it's gold dust. Back outside, the sun is slightly westward now. The air smells like cypress and sun-warmed stone. You take a brief walk around the monastery wall. Not far, just enough to stretch your legs and peek over the slope into the valley below. From here, the world stretches into a mosaic of green terraces, distant huts, and the glint of river water threading through the land like a ribbon of glass. You spot a falcon circling high above. For a moment, you wish you were that bird, free of deadlines, ink blotches, and marginalia debates. Then you remember falcons eat live rodents and get pooped on mid-flight by other birds. Everything has its price. You head back toward the main buildings, passing a monk who's muttering to himself while walking backward. A penance, maybe, or just a new meditation trick. You nod respectfully and do not interrupt. The rest of the afternoon is reserved for practice, a luxury time block given to improving non-textual skills. You decide to spend it refining your marginal drawings. Not full illuminations, just decorative flourishes, leaves, birds, scrollwork. You set up at your desk, lay out a spare sheet of low-grade parchment, and begin sketching. Your first try is a vine. It starts fine but quickly morphs into something resembling a very confused snake. You sigh, flip the sheet, and try again. This time, a bird perched among berries. Passable. Still a bit judgmental looking. You keep at it, drawing and redrawing. Time slides past. At one point, a monk passes and glances down. Your eagle looks smug. It's a dove. Then it's definitely smug. You grin. The critique doesn't sting. You think of how all this, these drawings, this text, this inked devotion, will be bound one day. Sewn into leather covers. Stored in libraries. Read aloud. Prayed over. Surviving long after your bones turn to dust. There's something quietly beautiful about that. Quietly terrifying. You pause your sketching and stretch your fingers. Your back aches. Your shoulders buzz with fatigue. But your spirit, well, it's somewhere between contentment and, please let there be dinner soon. You glance out the window. The light is beginning to shift again. Evening will come soon, and with it, more prayer, more scribing, and a little less warmth. But for now, you've got ink under your nails, sunlight on your face, and the faint memory of lentils sitting warm in your belly. Not a bad life. Evening creeps in slowly, as it always does here in the Highlands, like a storyteller that knows it's not in a rush. The air cools, the colors soften, and long shadows start reaching across the monastery grounds like sleepy arms. You finish shading the last line of your final vine flourish, set your brush down with exaggerated drama, and sigh like you've just finished painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling with a toothpick. The bell rings again, 4 quick tones and a long pause. Vespers. You rise from your desk with a bit of groaning that earns a smirk from Tesfaye. You walk like your spine's made of stacked codices, he quips. You should see me after the midnight service, you reply. I look like a folded map of Jerusalem. You file into the chapel once more, shoulders bumping as everyone squeezes into place. This time the scent is stronger, more incense, more burning wax, more sacred solemnity. A monk swings the censer slowly, and smoke curls up into the rafters, where bats probably live rent-free and judge you from the dark. You chant, you bow, you stand. The ritual rhythms pull your thoughts inward. You think about the transfiguration again, the gold halo you'll apply tomorrow, the shimmer you hope to capture. You think about the parchment you rejected earlier, and whether you were too quick to judge. You think about how this room holds centuries of prayers, how each stone has absorbed 1,000 whispered hopes. And then, in the middle of a prayer, your stomach growls. Loudly. You pretend it didn't happen. So does everyone else. Except Tesfaye, who gives you a side-eye glance so theatrical you nearly break into a laugh mid-psalm. Once the service ends, the monks and scribes shuffle out, quiet and slow. Some head to the evening meal, lighter fare this time, mostly broth and a few pieces of flatbread. You decide to skip it tonight, partly out of piety, mostly because the broth has been suspiciously translucent this week. Instead, you take a walk around the cloister, slow, meditative steps. The columns cast long, curved shadows, and the marble floor is cool beneath your sandals. You can hear the wind whispering through the trees on the outer slopes of the monastery. It's peaceful here, in a way that makes you forget time exists. You pause near a small fountain fed by a spring. It's carved with animals, lions, fish, birds, all worn smooth by centuries of weather and fingers. You dip your hands in the water. It's cold, mountain-born, refreshing enough to remind you you're alive, but cold enough to make you question your decisions. You think about your mentor, Abba Temrit. He taught you your first Gizi letters, made you recite psalms until your tongue could twist them without thought, and once hit you lightly on the back of the head when you confused mystery with donkey in a manuscript margin. He passed 3 winters ago. His bones lie under the floor of the chapel now, along with the others. Sometimes you imagine his voice correcting your strokes as you write. You find it comforting. Mostly. The wind picks up, and the trees sway like they're nodding in agreement. You head back toward your cell. Not quite ready for sleep, but ready to be horizontal. Your chamber is small. Just a mat, a low table, a single candle stub, and the ever-present smell of ink that seems to follow you like a faithful but slightly clumsy dog. You light the candle, watching its flame fight against the dark. You pull out a scrap of parchment from your satchel, something you've been working on in secret. A poem. Not scripture. Not approved. But sometimes your mind needs to create without the weight of canon pressing on every syllable. The poem is about rain, and goats, and maybe love. It's unclear. You're still refining the metaphors. You add a line. She walks like summer creeping up the hills, sly and unannounced. You nod. That's not bad. You'll hide this page under your mat later. If anyone finds it, you'll claim it's a weather observation. Very spiritual. Very meteorological. You extinguish the candle and lie back on your mat. The stone wall at your back is cool, the blanket rough but warm. You stare up into the dark, tracing invisible lines across the ceiling. Your fingers twitch slightly as if still gripping a quill. That's the curse of a scribe. Even when the day ends, your hand wants to keep writing. Your brain keeps drafting. You dream in illuminated margins. You close your eyes. And then, knock, knock, knock. You groan. Well, no. It's the gatekeeper. He calls softly from outside your door. A traveler has arrived. With a scroll. That gets your attention. You shuffle upright, quickly adjusting your robe, and open the door. The gatekeeper looks mildly amused. He says he's from Aksum. Says he has a codex for the library. Your brain is already racing. Aksum? That's not just a nearby town. That's a city of libraries and trade routes and churches that look like palaces. Anything from there is automatically more exciting than the average day's work. You follow the gatekeeper down to the visitors' quarters, a small stone room with woven mats and a low fire pit. The traveler is thin, weathered, dressed in layered robes that show dust from half the highlands. He carries a bundle wrapped in cloth. He returns it with the kind of nod that says he's seen a few things he'd rather not talk about before dinner. This, he says, unwrapping the bundle, was discovered in a ruined chapel near Lake Tana. The cloth falls away. Inside is a codex, thick, leather-bound, and visibly old. You feel a thrill shoot through your spine. You take it reverently, as if it might vanish if you breathe too hard. The leather is cracked but supple. The clasp is still intact. You open the cover slowly. Guizi script. Familiar but older. The calligraphy is fine, more looping than yours. The margins contain delicate sketches of crosses, plants, birds. You see a date scribbled near the bottom of one page, well over a century old. And then, something stranger, a margin note that seems to be in a different hand. Newer. Sloppier. A scribe's comment, maybe? You squint at it. This part was copied from a northern book. Do not trust the measurements. Interesting. You flip further. This isn't just scripture, it's commentary. Herbal recipes. Star charts. There's even a small map of the Nile drawn like it's a wandering serpent. You glance at the traveler. How did you come by this? He shrugs. I didn't steal it, if that's what you're thinking. It was under a stone slab. The chapel was abandoned. Locals feared it was cursed. I figured a monastery might find better use for it. You nod slowly. You figured right. Later, once the traveler is settled in with food and warmth, you bring the codex to the abbot's chamber. He listens silently as you explain what you found. Then he says, "You will catalog it. Copy any fragile sections. We'll decide later what to share." You're practically vibrating with excitement. This is what scribes dream of: forgotten knowledge, texts untouched for decades, the chance to preserve something teetering on the edge of being lost forever. You stay up half the night reading by candlelight, eyes burning, hand cramped. The codex smells like dust and cedar, like age and mystery. You wonder who wrote these words before you, what they feared, what they hoped would be remembered. You hope they'd be glad you're reading them now. Morning doesn't greet you so much as drag you into consciousness by your ankles. Your body aches from too many hours hunched over that old codex, your candle long since burned out, your neck twisted in the world's least ergonomic reading position. You blink in the low dawn light and feel the unmistakable grit of parchment dust in your hair. A scribe's version of glitter. It gets everywhere and never truly leaves. But none of that matters, because today you get to start copying from the codex. You splash cold water on your face, slap yourself lightly to remind your brain it lives in a body, and stagger to the chapel for morning prayers. You chant like a man possessed by both devotion and caffeine withdrawal, and when the final amen echoes through the stone arches, you make a beeline for the scriptorium like it's a feast hall and you haven't eaten in 3 days. The codex has been placed in the center of the main table, on a wooden stand that smells faintly of pine resin and authority. It's a chunky book, more like a small fortress, and you're half convinced it could stop a sword if swung correctly. You've been given permission to work with it directly, though with gloves, and this part was said very clearly, no daydreaming near the inkpot. You gather your tools, a fresh quill trimmed to a fine point, a tiny knife for trimming and scraping errors, your oops blade, a small jar of walnut ink, and your personal parchment sheets, rough-edged but patiently prepared. Your inkstone still bears the dried remnants of yesterday's prayers. You murmur something to it like a pep talk. Let's make history behave today. The first few lines are in Gizi, of course, but older, more ornate. You take your time copying the letters, letting the shapes find rhythm in your hand. Each curve and line is like stepping into someone else's shoes, someone long gone but still whispering through their brushstrokes. You try to mimic the original hand, but not too closely, just enough to honor it. You've been taught that the personality of the scribe should remain faint, like the background drone of a flute under a choir. There, but not starring. After a few pages, you start to notice oddities. Marginalia. Some of it nonsense, squiggles and doodles. Others are full phrases, I skipped lunch for this, and, God forgive me, I hate this chapter. One simply reads, Lice again. You snort softly. Apparently, being a scribe in the 14th century wasn't all discipline and divine purpose either. You wonder if this anonymous predecessor ever thought a teenager from the next century would laugh at his parasite woes. You pause on a particularly strange page. It's a herbal recipe, wedged between a theological commentary and what appears to be a weather calendar. The recipe claims to cure fevers with boiled fig leaves and powdered tortoiseshell. That seems medically suspect. Historians still argue whether these kinds of healing texts were based on actual practice, or if they were just tossed in by monks trying to cover all spiritual bases, Bible, blessings, and backyard pharmacy. The temptation to test the recipe on Tesfaye is almost too strong. You resist. For now. Lunch is a blur. A quick bite of flatbread and spiced chickpeas eaten one-handed while you continue transcribing. Your fingers are stained dark from the walnut ink. Your thumb already bears a faint ridge from holding the quill. The familiar signs of good, hard work. Or repetitive stress injury. But let's stay romantic about it. Midday prayers come and go, but today you barely register them. Your mind is humming with theories about the codex. The star charts suggest it might have come from a monastery near the Nile Delta, where astronomy was practiced alongside theology. Some of the marginal notes use vocabulary common in the Tigray language, a sign the book may have passed through multiple hands before reaching the chapel where it was buried. And there's that one map, small, hand-drawn, almost childlike in its simplicity. It shows a mountain with a star above it and a path marked with strange symbols. A monk you consulted said it might represent a local pilgrimage route. Another thinks it's just someone trying to remember how to get to market. You like the first theory better. In the afternoon, Tesfaye finally drags you away from your desk. Come, he says. You're starting to hum like a struck bowl. We're going to the binding shed. You groan but follow. The binding shed sits just behind the scriptorium, a simple wooden structure that always smells like leather and old secrets. Inside, monks are sewing quires, those little packets of folded parchment sheets, into tight, durable bundles. The method hasn't changed much in generations. Pierce, loop, tighten. Repeat until your hands feel like someone else's. You sit beside Tesfaye and watch for a while. He's threading linen cord through a stack of quires, tongue poking out in deep concentration. "Don't mock me," he says without looking up. "I would never, you lie." Another monk, an older one called Abba Solomon, shows you how to use a bone folder to smooth the creases and press the stack into submission. The tool feels heavy in your hand, like it holds a bit of every book it's ever helped bind. You ask him whether he's ever worked on anything like the Aksum Codex. He grunts. "Once. A book that stank of mold and wisdom. Lost in a fire 5 years later." That's Scribe horror story material. Worse than running out of ink mid-psalm. You stay in the shed for an hour, soaking in the rhythm of the work. There's something comforting about the sound of thread pulling through parchment, soft, persistent, like footsteps on moss. Later, back in the scriptorium, you begin laying out your copied pages in order. You've managed to transcribe nearly 8 full folios today. Not bad for a sleepy teen with an ink obsession. You stack them with care, weighing them down with a smooth river stone you keep at your desk. A lucky stone, or at least one that hasn't betrayed you yet. You light the tiny lamp on your table. The sun's sinking now. Everything outside is bathed in gold and shadows. From your window, you can just make out the shape of the traveler leaving the monastery gates, his robe fluttering like a bird's wings. You wonder if he has more books hidden in his pack. Or more stories. Probably both. The codex is still on its stand. Open. Waiting. You trace a finger along one of the final pages you read today. The ink here is paler, more fragile. Like the scribe was running out of both materials and time. There's a final phrase in the margin, barely visible. If these words survive, may they reach kind eyes. You sit back, letting that sink in. You are those kind eyes. And now, you're part of the chain. A link between lost scribes and future readers. A voice in the quiet chorus of those who've preserved words, one careful letter at a time. You wake to the sound of rain, soft, persistent, tapping on the clay tiles like 1,000 tiny scribes drumming their fingers on their desks. It's not a thunderous rain, not the dramatic kind that floods valleys and makes livestock rethink their life choices. It's the gentle, soaking sort, the kind that settles into the bones of the earth and makes everything smell like moss and damp parchment. You lie there for a moment, wrapped in your scratchy blanket, blinking into the dim light of dawn. Your back protests yesterday's hunched enthusiasm, and your hands are stiff, fingers curled as if still gripping a quill. You stretch, yawn like a lion who's overslept his hunt, and whisper a short prayer. Something about gratitude. Something about guidance. Something about not spilling ink today. The monastery feels different in the rain. Quieter, more introspective. The usual sounds of morning chores are muffled, and even the goats seem less committed to their usual chaos. You take a detour on your way to morning prayers, ducking beneath overhangs, watching rivulets of water trace paths down stone walls worn smooth by centuries. At the chapel, the prayers feel heavier, more solemn. Not in a bad way, just thicker. Like the rain has soaked into the words themselves, adding weight and resonance. You sing, bow, cross yourself. The candle smoke curls lazily in the damp air, and your breath fogs slightly in front of you. Afterwards, you return to the scriptorium, but not to your desk. Not today. Today, you're headed into the archives. Now, to be clear, the archives is a generous term. It's more like a glorified cave, carved into the hillside, cool year-round, with shelves of aged wood bowed under the weight of centuries of wisdom. It smells like old leather, forgotten dust, and the vague whiff of mildew that no amount of candle smoke can quite cover. But to you, it's paradise. The abbot has given you and Tesfaye permission to help with the quarterly rotation, bringing out older codices for inspection, drying, repair, or, in tragic cases, retirement. Some pages get too brittle to touch. Some bindings crumble with a breath. Your job is to help assess what can be saved and what must be quietly let go. Tesfaye meets you at the entrance, holding a torch and looking half thrilled, half terrified. "If I vanish in there," he says, "tell my mother I died surrounded by greatness. I'll tell her you tripped over a rat and screamed," you say, patting his shoulder. Inside, the light flickers on parchment edges and gilded spines. Some codices are wrapped in cloth, some bound in leather that's turned ashy with age. You move carefully, like a guest at a royal banquet who's terrified of offending the soup. You start with a top shelf, thin volumes, some no thicker than your palm. Tesfaye takes notes while you inspect each one. One is a hymnal from the 12th century, filled with tiny musical notations that look like birds dancing on branches. Another is a traveler's journal, its pages filled with place names, weather reports, and a surprisingly detailed account of what the writer thought of monastery food. Spoiler, he was not impressed. Then you find something unusual. It's a small book, bound in reddish goat leather, clasped with bronze that's gone green with time. The title is faded, almost illegible, but inside, you gasp. It's not Ghazi, or rather, it is partially. But the main body of the text? It's written in Arabic. Now, you've seen some Arabic before. Merchants and travelers bring it, sometimes even medical texts or trade records. But this looks like theology, or philosophy. Something deep. You run your fingers over the script, admiring the careful curves and sharp lines. Tesfaye peers over your shoulder. "That's from the eastern coast, isn't it?" "Maybe further," you whisper. "Could be from the Hadramaut region. Or Oman." Historians still argue whether the presence of Islamic texts in Christian Ethiopian monasteries was a sign of scholarly curiosity or simply practical collection from trade and conquest. Either way, here it is, sitting on a shelf beside a book of saints' lives and a bestiary. You take it carefully to the front of the archive, laying it open to dry near the brazier. The rain has made the air damp, and you don't want the pages to swell. You go back in. Later, Tesfaye calls out to you. This one has mushrooms drawn on the margins. You join him, and sure enough, the codex is filled with tiny fungi sketched beside passages of psalm translations. Some are carefully labeled. Others have faces and tiny staffs, like wizard mushrooms going on adventures. "What is this?" Tesfaye grins. "Spiritual nourishment?" You spend the rest of the morning giggling over mushroom monks, careful not to smudge anything, and making mental notes about the odd whimsy of past scribes. Who says monks don't have a sense of humor? By midday, the torchlight is giving you a headache. You step out into the rain for air. The storm has softened into mist now, clouds hugging the ground, the world shrouded in silvery quiet. You sit beneath the overhang and eat your lunch, lentils, bread, and a small slice of dried figure. Not bad. Even the rain seems to approve. In the afternoon, you're back at your desk, but your mind's still in the archives. You copy slowly today, distracted by thoughts of the Arabic codex. Part of you wants to learn more, to read the entire thing. Another part wonders if it even belongs here, tucked in among saints and gospels. You jot a note in your margin. Languages are prayers with different voices. Later, during a break, you sneak into the garden. It's lush from the rain, and small frogs are out, hopping between puddles like miniature prophets. You pick a few herbs for the apothecary monks: thyme, rue, and some beetle leaf you know they'll dry for chewing during long vigils. The garden always calms you. Something about soil under your fingernails helps reset your spinning thoughts. Back in the scriptorium, you decide to test something. You take one of the copied star charts from the Aksum Codex and lay it beside a similar page from a much older book you found this morning. The resemblance is uncanny. Same constellation patterns, same mythological notes, even the same inky smudge in Orion's left arm. Could this be the source the Aksum Scribe copied from? You're getting dangerously close to historian territory. You might need to write a commentary, or at least a really smug footnote. Evening comes quickly, the rain falling again in soft waves. You help lock up the archives, codices wrapped and stored, logs updated in careful, tiny handwriting. You've done good work today. Your hands ache, your back is sore, and your brain is buzzing with questions you may never get to answer. At dinner, Tesfaye raises a toast with his water cup. To mushroom monks, Arabic mysteries, and rain that knows when to be quiet. You clink your cup against his. To books that whisper across centuries. And to sleep, which you need desperately, but resist, because your mind won't stop dancing through star maps, fungal doodles, and the gentle chaos of a life devoted to ink and memory. You wake to a bell. Not the usual soft chime that invites you gently into the day like a warm hand pulling back your blanket. No, this is the sharp, commanding clang that says, "Get up, something's happening, and if you don't move fast, you'll miss it, or worse, get assigned to latrine duty." You leap up, knock over your ink stone, step on your own sandals, and half-sprint to the courtyard. Tesfaye's already there, hair wild, tunic inside out, clutching a half-eaten date. "Procession," he pants. "Royal envoy." Of course. You forgot the monks had been whispering about this all week. Some vague rumor of a royal visit from a court official passing through, maybe even someone connected to the Solomonic dynasty. You had mentally filed it under probably gossip, but here it is, complete with horse hooves, banners, and enough ceremonial fanfare to make your ears ring. You squint at the gate as the retinue enters. A small group, but impressively dressed. The lead figure rides a white mule, symbolic, you recall, of humility, though the golden embroidery on his robe suggests he's not exactly practicing poverty. Behind him, soldiers in red sashes, attendants carrying gifts, and a scribe, yes, a scribe, balancing a portable writing desk strapped to his back like a turtle shell. That gives you pause. A traveling scribe? You've only read about those. You elbow Tesfaye. "I need to talk to him." Tesfaye grins. You just want to steal his ink recipes. You don't deny it. The courtyard is abuzz. Monks hurry to prepare rooms, fetch water, lay out fruits and bread. You're assigned to discreet assistance, which mostly means standing nearby looking respectful and being ready to answer any odd question about monastery routines. It's a lot of nodding, bowing, and trying not to fidget. The royal envoy dismounts, greeting the abbot with the practiced air of someone who's greeted 100 abbots before. "We carry the blessings of the emperor and the good favor of his scribes," he intones. You catch the eye of the traveling scribe. He's older than you, but not by much. Maybe in his 20s. His robe is stained with ink and dust, and you spot a quill tucked behind his ear. The universal sign of, "Don't talk to me unless it's about punctuation." Later, during the midday meal, which is shockingly fancy, with honeyed flatbread and something suspiciously like roasted pigeon, you find your chance. You catch him alone near the well, rinsing his inkwells. "Excuse me," you say, trying to sound casual and not like you're about to burst from curiosity. "What's your name?" He glances up. "Tuadros." "I'm a scribe too." "Well, training. I copy texts and draw the occasional mushroom." He smiles. We all start somewhere. You sit beside him on the low stone bench. What's it like? Traveling with scrolls? Writing while moving? Doesn't your ink spill? He chuckles. Sometimes. I keep a cork in it when we're writing. But the Emperor's court moves often. There's always a need for letters, records, treaties. I write them, seal them, and make copies when needed. Like a messenger, but slower and inkier. He pulls a scroll from his satchel. An agreement between the court and a merchant guild near Zyla. They want tax relief on camel caravans. You read the smooth Ghazi script, neat and fast, unmistakably different from the slow, ornate hand of monastic scribes. You write like you're being chased. I often am. You spend the rest of the afternoon talking. He tells you of ink made from crushed berries in the highlands, of secret messages encoded in line spacing, of scribes who memorize entire treaties in case the parchment gets wet crossing a river. One story stands out. A scribe who claimed he saw a manuscript burst into flames during a lightning storm. Historians still argue whether that was divine punishment or just bad shelter placement. Tuadros says with a smirk. You asked to see his seal, a carved piece of horn shaped like a lion's paw. My mark, he says. Every document I finish gets it. You don't say it aloud, but you desperately want one. Later that evening, as the rain begins again, Tuadros joins you and Tesfaye in the scriptorium. You show him your workspace, the codex fragments, the parchment drying on the rack. He runs a hand across one of your transcriptions. Good hand, balanced lines. You care about the words. You try not to glow with pride. Tesfaye coughs suspiciously and mumbles something about ego inflation. Tuadros picks up the Aksum star chart. His brow furrows. Where did this come from? You explain, briefly, about the burial, the restoration, the notes you've been making. He pulls a folded scrap of parchment from his robe. Unfolds it. You stare. It's the same star chart, rougher, simpler, and missing half the annotations, but unmistakably from the same tradition. Where did you get this, you ask? Traded for it from a merchant on the Dalak Islands. He said it came from the old monastic schools. I didn't believe him, until now. The implications swirl in your brain. If that's true, these charts didn't just stay in Aksum. They traveled, transformed, and were shared across oceans. Another piece in the puzzle. Another thread connecting monks and merchants, prayer and navigation. You both sit, hunched over the two charts, comparing lines and angles. You're speaking a little too fast, a little too loud, until the abbot clears his throat from the doorway. Gentlemen, he says, some of us are trying to grow old in peace. You bow sheepishly. Tuadros chuckles and begins packing up. Before he leaves, he presses something into your hand, a tiny seal, carved in wood, shaped like a small scroll. Not as grand as a lion paw, he says. But make your mark. You grip it like it might disappear. That night, you lie awake, staring at the ceiling beams. The rain is soft again, the world quiet except for the occasional drip from the eaves. You think about the miles of roads your new friend will walk, the scrolls he'll carry, the words he'll write. And you wonder if someday, someone will find one of your pages in a monastery or a market stall and ask, who was this scribe? You hope they can tell. The next day is a blur of ink and parchment. The visit from Tuadros has given you something new to strive for, a sense of purpose beyond copying and pasting the same old holy texts. You want to be more than just a scribbler of prayers. You want to be a part of something bigger, a part of that network of travelers, messengers, and keepers of knowledge. The abbot's words echo in your mind. Some of us are trying to grow old in peace. Maybe he's right. Maybe this life is supposed to be more than chasing mysteries and dusty codices. But right now, your hands ache to hold more scrolls, more secrets, more marks on history. And that means getting better, not just faster at your craft. You spend the next few days practicing, drawing maps, copying passages in different hands, experimenting with colors. You make some truly horrendous mistakes. Your lines wobble like the shaky legs of a newborn goat, but you don't stop. Tesfaye watches, bemused, as you grow more obsessed. "There's something wrong with you," he comments one evening, glancing up from his own work. "I haven't seen you this intense since you started writing that book." "Yes, that book. The one about the legendary king who could talk to lions. The one you tried to copy in a single day and ended up ruining the parchment with sweat and frustration. It was a good story. You'd always tell it later, perhaps after you were renowned for your own work. But now, you're focused on the present. You sit with your quill poised over fresh parchment, looking at the Aksum star chart and trying to decode the hidden messages in its lines. You've been thinking more and more about how that chart wasn't just a map of the stars. There was something deeper there, something like a guide, but to what? It's not long before the answers come. The more you work on the symbols, the more you realize they aren't just astronomical, they're spiritual. The chart isn't just plotting stars in the sky, it's a representation of heaven on earth. The codex you've been copying from, the one about the saints, makes subtle references to the same star system. You're onto something. You can feel it. Tesfaye interrupts your thoughts as he slides a bowl of stew in front of you, his face serious for once. "We've been asked to help with an important commission." You raise an eyebrow. "What kind of commission?" "A scroll for the Highlands. The Queen has requested a new manuscript, one that includes the history of our kings and their spiritual journey. She's asked for you to help with it." You blink. "The Queen? The Queen? The Queen of Ethiopia? I don't know if I—" "No," he cuts in. "I don't think you understand. The Queen's scribe personally requested you. She's seen some of your work. The scriptorium here will prepare the text, but they want your hand on it." Your heart skips a beat. This is more than just an opportunity. This is a test. Your work will be in the hands of royalty, copied and revered by the highest officials in the land. You nod slowly, unsure if this is the moment you've been waiting for, or if it's a chance for you to make an epic mistake. Either way, you're in. There's no turning back now. The next few weeks blur into a whirlwind of preparation. You work under the watchful eyes of the abbot and senior scribes, carefully crafting a manuscript that tells the history of Ethiopia's kings from the days of the Aksumite Empire to the present. It's a monumental task, page after page, minute detail after minute detail, but you feel a sense of excitement with every stroke of your quill. The abbot's original instructions are clear: write the truth, but make it beautiful. So you do. You embellish where needed, but you make sure to preserve the historical integrity. The battles, the alliances, the saints who interceded on behalf of the kingdom. You include prayers to make sure the words are blessed, and you take great care in the design of the manuscript. Borders of gold leaf, swirls of blue and green that look like waves crashing on a shore, all to bring life to the text. The Queen's scribe visits often, overseeing your work with a critical eye but also a hint of admiration. "Your hands are steady," he says one day, peering over your shoulder. "You have the talent, but this will define you." Your hands shake with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Is this it? The moment when you stop being just a boy copying manuscripts and start being a scribe who leaves his mark on the world? The work moves forward, and the days begin to feel longer. The nights are sleepless as you perfect every letter, every flourish, ensuring the manuscript will be worthy of royalty. But it's not just about the aesthetic. It's about something deeper, the weight of responsibility that you're beginning to understand more fully. It's one thing to write a history of kings. It's another to realize that your hand might become the very thing that keeps their legacy alive, long after their bodies turn to dust. One evening, as you add the final touches to the manuscript's border, You step back and let out a slow breath. It's done. The manuscript is finished, a work of art, a compilation of the old and new, of fact and faith. It's more than you ever thought you could achieve. Tesfaye walks in, his eyes wide. It's ready. You nod. It's ready. The next morning, the royal envoy arrives to take the manuscript to the queen. The moment feels surreal. You hand the scroll over, your heart heavy with pride and uncertainty. As the envoy leaves, Tesfaye pats your back. You did it. This will be remembered. You smile, but there's no time for celebration. Tomorrow, there will be more manuscripts to copy, more scrolls to finish. The work never ends. And maybe that's just as well. Because every stroke of ink is a chance to leave a legacy, a chance to be remembered not just as a scribe, but as someone who added their own story to the ongoing story of Ethiopia. And who knows? Maybe someday, someone will find your scroll, and they'll wonder what kind of scribe you were, what it was like to write beneath the rain, to chart the stars, to dance with history itself. You can only hope they'll see the truth, that you were a part of something much bigger than yourself. That, like every scribe before you, you helped to make sure that the stories of kings, saints, and travelers didn't fade into the dark. You made sure they lived on. The days after the manuscript is sent to the queen are strange. At first, there's a feeling of release, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. The weight of the commission lifts off your shoulders. But with that weight gone, you feel empty. You spend the next few weeks refining your technique, perfecting the minor details of your daily routine, how to fold a scroll just right, how to make sure the ink doesn't smudge, how to carry your supplies without your bag slapping against your side like a limp fish. You're good at it now, efficient, but you miss the excitement, the challenge. Every day is more of the same, copying, correcting, copying again. The most exciting thing that happens is a batch of new parchment being delivered, and even that's just more paper to work with. The royal commission feels like a distant memory. That is, until the messenger arrives. He's a young man, wide-eyed and out of breath, looking as if he's run from the capital itself. He hands you a scroll, sealed with the queen's mark. You recognize the wax instantly. It's the same as the one you pressed into your manuscript. Your hands tremble slightly as you break the seal. Inside, a simple note, written in a delicate hand. You have honored our kingdom's history with your work. We request your presence at court to receive your reward. Come prepared to write. The Queen. Your heart skips a beat. This is it. The moment you've been waiting for. Not just the satisfaction of completing a job, but an invitation to the center of it all. You will write for the Queen herself. You'll be part of something greater than your monastery's walls, greater than anything you could have imagined when you first started copying scrolls as a child. You waste no time. The next morning, after a night of restless anticipation, you gather your things, your quills, your ink, your seal, and even that tiny wooden stamp Tuwadros gave you. You tell Tesfaye, but his reaction is mixed. Part disbelief, part joy. He insists on helping you pack, though you both know there's no point in bringing much. After all, you're going to the Queen's court. You'll be staying there for as long as the work requires, and you'll be surrounded by the finest scholars, priests, and scribes the kingdom has to offer. You won't be in the monastery anymore, Tesfaye says quietly. You'll be different. People will look at you differently. You're not sure how to respond. Different? You've spent so many years trying to find your place in the scriptorium, struggling to define what it means to be a scribe. But now you're going to court, and everything will change. It has to. When you reach the royal palace, you are struck by how different everything feels. The air is thick with incense, the walls gleam with gold, and everywhere you look, people are moving with purpose. The courtiers, the soldiers, the servants, everyone seems to know their role in the grand play that unfolds within these walls. You're just one more person now, but you can't help but feel small amidst it all. The Queen Scribe meets you at the gate, smiling with approval. "The Queen is pleased to see you," he says, leading you through a labyrinth of halls and courtyards. As you walk, you pass tapestries depicting legendary battles, saints, and kings. You notice that the faces of these kings aren't just drawn to look powerful, they're drawn to look eternal. Every king in these images is frozen, forever standing in triumph. The Queen herself waits in a private chamber, surrounded by scrolls and illuminated manuscripts. She's older than you expected, but her presence is commanding. She looks up from a scroll, her face calm yet intense, as if she's been waiting for you for years. "You've done well," she says simply. "You have honored our history, and now I ask you to continue this work." She doesn't offer a reward in gold or land, though the abundance of riches around her suggests she could. Instead, she asks you to write, to continue preserving the stories of the past for future generations, to ensure that the memory of the kingdom, its people, and its gods is never lost. There's something in her eyes, a weight, an expectation, that makes you understand that your work will be important. This is no longer just a commission. This is a calling. Days turn into weeks as you begin your new role at court. It's not the peaceful, steady rhythm of the monastery. It's chaotic, filled with the noise of courtiers vying for attention, soldiers marching by, and the constant pressure to produce perfect, sacred manuscripts. Every word you write carries a responsibility, a burden you feel pressing against your chest. You are no longer just a scribe in the shadows, tucked away in the monastery. You are a key player in the kingdom's narrative. And it's not just the Queen who demands perfection. You're surrounded by scholars, religious figures, and other scribes who each have their own methods, their own styles. Some are strict in their adherence to the old traditions. Others are more experimental, pushing boundaries and testing the limits of what can be recorded. The debates between them are constant, and you find yourself caught between the old ways and the new, trying to carve out your own space. It's here that you realize just how far you've come. At the monastery, you were just another young scribe, copying texts day after day. Now you're in the heart of the kingdom, shaping the very history you once only read about. You're writing the stories that will live on long after you're gone. You find a moment of quiet in your small corner of the scriptorium, your quill moving over parchment with a fluidity you hadn't felt before. The noise of the court fades away as you focus entirely on the task at hand. There's something meditative about it now. The flow of ink, the rhythm of your hand, the connection to the scribes who came before you. And you know that, in some way, you will never truly leave the monastery. Its teachings are with you now, etched in every letter you write. You'll carry those sacred words, those patterns, through every manuscript, every scroll, until your own story becomes a part of the tapestry of the kingdom. Perhaps one day, someone will find one of your works, and they'll look at the marks you made and wonder what kind of scribe you were. But for now, you focus on the present. The work before you, the history unfolding beneath your fingertips. You are part of something far bigger than yourself. Life at court has a rhythm, but it's nothing like the slow, steady pulse of the monastery. It's more like a drumbeat, constantly shifting and changing, and you're caught in the middle of it all. The Queen's scribes, those older, more experienced men, move around you like shadows, always watching, always analyzing. There's an energy in the air, but it's not the warmth of camaraderie. It's more like the pressure of 1,000 eyes, all demanding perfection at every stroke of your quill. You spend your days copying royal decrees, transcribing religious texts, and sometimes even drafting correspondence for the Queen herself. It's an endless cycle of writing, reading, and rewriting. But it's not just the quantity of work that's overwhelming, it's the importance. Every word you write could shape the kingdom's future. And then there's the quiet. the moments when the court settles into a rare lull. The corridors become still, and the voices fade into the background. That's when you realize how alone you are. Yes, you're surrounded by people, but you're also separate. The scribes, while they may offer technical advice, aren't your companions in the same way Tesfaye was. The queen doesn't have time for casual conversations. And the other courtiers, well, they're too busy with their own schemes and ambitions to notice you. It's during one of these rare moments of quiet that you find yourself in the palace's grand library. It's an impressive space, filled with ancient scrolls, manuscripts, and books, some so old that their pages are fragile and their ink nearly faded. You feel a deep sense of awe as you walk between the rows of knowledge, your fingers brushing against the spines of works that have been carefully preserved for centuries. This library holds the wisdom of the kingdom's past, but it's not just a place to admire. It's a tool. And you've come to understand that the scribes of the court aren't just preserving history, they're actively shaping it. You pull a scroll from the shelf. It's an old manuscript, one you haven't seen before. As you unroll it, the delicate script before you seems almost alive, each letter flowing with purpose. It's a history of the kings, yes, but also a history of the gods and the saints who have walked this land. The text describes divine intervention in the kingdom's affairs, how certain kings were favored by the heavens, and how others were punished for their hubris. You can't help but wonder how much of this history is fact, and how much is myth. The lines between the two seem so blurred. Historians still argue whether the gods truly had a hand in the kingdom's rise, or if it was merely a way to justify the power of kings. Either way, these stories have shaped the minds of your people, and you, as a scribe, are tasked with recording them as they are, truth or legend. The more you read, the more you realize how important your role is. You're not just copying the past, you're giving it form. You're deciding what will be remembered and what will be forgotten. It's a heavy responsibility, and one that weighs on you more and more as you think about it. The next morning, you're summoned to the Queen's chambers. She's seated at a large desk, her attention focused on a stack of scrolls. You approach, bowing respectfully. "I need your help with something," she says without looking up. "There's a manuscript from the Aksumite period that needs to be copied, but it's different. I want you to look at it." You glance down at the scroll she pushes toward you. It's older than anything you've worked with before, its edges frayed and the ink fading in places. The script is difficult to read, old, archaic, almost cryptic. But there's something intriguing about it, something that pulls you in. The Queen watches you closely. This manuscript is said to contain the wisdom of the Aksumite kings. It's never been copied before, and it's been hidden for centuries. I want you to transcribe it, but I need you to approach it with care. The secrets inside are powerful. You nod, feeling a shiver run down your spine. There's something in her voice, a sense of urgency mixed with caution. She's not just concerned about the manuscript's preservation, she's worried about what it contains. You spend the next several days working on it, translating the text, carefully deciphering the worn script. The words are filled with references to kings and queens, to gods and spirits, and to ancient rites that seem almost too strange to be true. You've always believed in the power of the divine, but some of the rituals described here go beyond anything you've ever heard of. They involve sacrifices, communing with spirits, and invoking the powers of the earth itself. As you copy the words, you can't help but feel a growing unease. The manuscript seems to be calling you, urging you to understand its secrets. But there's a part of you that hesitates. Is this really something the world should know? Should such powerful knowledge be left buried in the past? Historians still argue whether the Aksumite kings really practiced such rites, or if these accounts were exaggerated over time. Some say the power of those kings came from their spiritual connection to the earth itself, while others believe it was simply the result of political and military strength. Either way, the myths surrounding them have endured for centuries. You begin to wonder if the Queen's request is more than just a scholarly pursuit. Is she trying to unlock something from the past, something that could give her more power? Or is she simply fascinated by the mysteries of her ancestors? You don't know, and you're not sure if you want to. But for now, you'll continue your work, because it's what you do. You're a scribe, and you record history, no matter how strange or unsettling it may be. One evening, as you near the end of your transcription, the Queen calls for you again. This time, her face is grave, her usual composure replaced by a look of uncertainty. "You've done well," she says, her voice low. "But there's more to this manuscript than we first thought. I need you to keep working on it. There are powers in these words, powers that we must understand." You nod, feeling a chill settle in your chest. The weight of the task has never been clearer. You're no longer just copying words. You're holding history's most ancient secrets in your hands. And you realize that, perhaps, some things are better left forgotten. You're alone now. Alone with the manuscript, its faded ink whispering secrets, urging you to dive deeper into its mysteries. The quiet is unsettling, but you've grown used to it. At court, the murmurs of power and influence swirl around you like a storm. But here, in your small corner of the royal scriptorium, it's just you and the past. The silence feels almost sacred, yet it presses down on you, as if waiting for you to reveal its truth. The manuscript, the one that's been hidden for centuries, has become your obsession. Every night, after your duties at court, you return to it. You pull the scrolls closer, squinting at the faded symbols. Some of the characters are familiar, but others are not. They're older, more arcane. You strain to make sense of them, consulting older texts, seeking guidance from the wisest scribes at court. But even they are unsure. You take it upon yourself to decipher the text, a task that's both daunting and intoxicating. The words seem to bend and shift beneath your eyes. You feel like you're chasing shadows, but you can't stop. There's a pull, a magnetic force, and the deeper you go, the stronger it becomes. You can't shake the feeling that you're not just transcribing history anymore. You're rewriting it. You're shaping it. Historians still argue whether such ancient manuscripts hold true power or if they're simply relics of a bygone age. Some say these old texts were meant to control those who read them, to imbue them with a sense of divine destiny. Others believe they're just stories, meant to create myth around powerful figures. But you're starting to wonder if it's possible for both to be true. If, perhaps, the power of these texts lies not in their content, but in their ability to influence those who read them. It's easy to get lost in this line of thinking. After all, you're a scribe. You've spent your life making sure that every letter is perfect, every word is exactly right. But now, as you examine this ancient manuscript, you realize that the true power of the scribe lies not in perfection, but in interpretation. The scribes of the past didn't just preserve history. They shaped it, they decided what to record and what to leave out. And in doing so, they became the authors of history itself. But there's something else, something that feels heavier than ink on parchment. You can't ignore the strange symbols that seem to pulse with an energy all their own. They're not just words, they're something more. Something you don't fully understand. The Queen's request to transcribe the manuscript was straightforward enough, but as you work through the pages, you begin to question her intentions. Why this manuscript? She's a ruler, after all, not a scholar. You've heard the whispers around court. People talk about her ambition, her desire to expand her kingdom's power. Could this manuscript, this strange piece of history, be the key to unlocking more than just knowledge? You don't want to believe it. You don't want to think that she might be using you, using your skills and your loyalty for something greater, something darker. But it's hard to ignore the clues. The urgency in her voice when she gave you the manuscript, the way she's been keeping a closer eye on your work. She's not just interested in what's written on these scrolls. She's interested in what they might unlock. And you? You're caught in the middle. You've never been a man of politics. You've never cared much for the scheming of courtiers or the endless games of power. You've always found solace in the simple act of writing. But now, you're entangled in something far bigger than yourself. The Queen's request was a summons to a deeper part of history, a history that might not be safe to uncover. The days slip by in a blur of scrolls, ink, and endless decoding. You lose track of time, and soon, the once clear lines between day and night blur. You live in the scriptorium now. Your body is tired, but your mind won't let you rest. The manuscript has become a puzzle, one that you're determined to solve, even if it consumes you. One night, you finally make a breakthrough. You decipher a passage that, when translated, reads like a prophecy. It speaks of a great ruler, one who will rise from the ashes of the past, a ruler who will command both land and spirit. The text suggests that this ruler will have the power to commune with the divine, to command the very forces of nature. It's a chilling thought, but you can't help but feel a sense of dread mingled with awe. The text doesn't just describe the power of kings. It suggests that such power is not only possible but inevitable. You wonder if the Queen sees herself in these lines, if she believes that she is the ruler destined to wield such power. And if that's the case, then what role do you play in this unfolding prophecy? Are you just a scribe, transcribing history as you've always done? Or are you, perhaps, a part of something much larger? The idea that your work could influence the course of history is both exhilarating and terrifying. As you reach the final pages of the manuscript, you feel a sense of finality. You've translated the text in its entirety. You've completed your task. But there's a weight on your shoulders, a sense of foreboding that won't let go. The words you've transcribed are more than just a record of the past. They're a roadmap for the future, and you wonder if you've made a mistake by unlocking them. The Queen calls for you again. This time, when she speaks, there's a gleam in her eyes that you've never seen before. She's no longer just a ruler. She's something else, something darker, something more powerful. "You've done well," she says, her voice almost a whisper. "The manuscript is complete. Now we must prepare for what comes next." And you realize, with a growing sense of dread, that you've been part of something all along. Something far bigger than a simple manuscript. The question is no longer whether you will survive this, because you've already crossed that line. The question is, what will happen once the power of the past is unleashed? The Queen's words echo in your mind as you leave her chambers, the manuscript still clutched in your hands. You've done your duty, transcribed the ancient text, but the weight of it all feels different now. What once seemed like an innocuous task, the simple work of a scribe, has morphed into something far more ominous. You're not just a witness to history anymore, you're part of it. And that realization settles over you like a shadow you can't escape. The night is dark as you make your way back to the scriptorium. The streets of the palace are eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The palace, with all its opulence and grandeur, feels hollow in the moonlight. The marble floors, the gold accents, the intricate tapestries, it all seems more like a facade now, a stage where power is performed rather than truly held. You try to focus on your work, on the task at hand, but your mind keeps returning to the manuscript, to the prophecy. A ruler who will command both land and spirit. Who could this ruler be, if not the Queen herself? And what did the text truly mean by commanding the forces of nature? You've heard of the old rituals, the sacrifices to spirits, but you've never truly believed in them. Not until now. The text spoke of communion with the divine, of drawing power from the earth itself. You've always thought of the gods as distant figures, watching from afar, but now you're starting to wonder. Could the queen really be on the brink of harnessing that kind of power? Could the ancient kings have wielded such influence, and if so, what price did they pay for it? Historians still argue whether the ancient kings of Aksum were truly divinely ordained, whether their power came from the gods or from their own military and political acumen. Some suggest that the kingdom's rise was a carefully orchestrated series of events, a blending of political savvy and religious propaganda. Others insist that the kings were chosen by the gods themselves, their authority unchallengeable. But the text you've transcribed seems to suggest that there's more to it, something hidden beneath the surface, something tied to the land itself. You've never questioned your role before. As a scribe, you've always been content with the quiet, meticulous work of recording the world around you. But now, it feels as if the world has shifted. You're no longer just observing history, you're a part of it. And that's a role you never expected to play. The next few days are a blur of courtly matters and royal decrees, all of it blending into one long, unbroken rhythm. You can't escape the feeling that something is about to change, something beyond your control. You felt it in the queen's gaze, in the way she's become more withdrawn, more intense. Her interest in the manuscript is no longer just academic. You sense that she's preparing for something. But what? And why does she need you to transcribe it all, to be the one to unlock this ancient knowledge? You've heard whispers at court about her increasing isolation, about how she's been consulting with strange advisors. Some say they're from distant lands, others suggest they're practitioners of old, forgotten rituals. There's talk of strange rites being performed in secret chambers within the palace, though no one knows for certain. No one dares to ask. It's on the 5th night after completing the manuscript that the queen summons you again. This time, it's not for a simple task. You're to come to her private chamber, and you know, without a doubt, that this is different. There's a palpable tension in the air, thick and heavy. When you arrive, she's waiting for you, seated at a large, ornate desk. The room is lit by a single, flickering candle, casting long shadows on the walls. The manuscript lies before her, open to a page you don't recognize. The text, once familiar, now seems foreign, its symbols more intricate, more alive than before. You wonder if you've misread something, if there's a hidden layer to the text that you missed. She gestures for you to sit. Her eyes are focused, almost too focused. "I've had some revelations," she says, her voice low and calm, but there's an edge to it, a dangerous sharpness that you've never heard before. The text speaks of more than just kings and power. It speaks of transformation, of transcending the physical realm. You swallow, feeling a chill creep up your spine. Transformation, you repeat, your voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replies, her gaze intense. The manuscript speaks of a ritual, an ancient one, that can grant dominion over both life and death. A king who can control the very forces of nature. But it's not just about power, it's about becoming something more. A god, perhaps. Immortal. You're stunned. The words don't seem to fit together in your mind. You try to speak, but your throat feels dry, the words stuck. But that's impossible. No one could. "No," she interrupts sharply, her eyes never leaving yours. "It's not impossible. It's been done before. The ancient kings of Aksum. Some say they achieved it. That's why they were so revered, so feared. It wasn't just their military strength. It was something else. Something divine." She leans forward, her voice lowering. "And I intend to unlock it. I have the knowledge, the power, the means. What I need now is you. You've unlocked the path, and now you will help me walk it." You feel a rush of panic flood through you. You've always thought of your role as a scribe as one of neutrality, one of simply recording history. But now, history is being rewritten in front of you, and you're being asked to participate. You wonder if you've made a mistake. If, perhaps, there's no way out of this once you've crossed this line. Historians still debate the true nature of the rituals performed by the Aksumite kings, whether they were meant to empower the king or bind him to the gods. But one thing is clear: those who sought to transcend their mortal limitations often paid a terrible price. You know now that you're no longer just a passive observer. The queen has changed. And so have you. The queen's words linger in the air, thick with the weight of what she's revealed. You sit there, motionless, trying to reconcile the strange, unsettling idea that your work as a scribe has led you to this very moment. You've always thought of your role as neutral, distant from the power struggles of the court. But now, as you sit before the queen, you realize that the history you've spent your life recording may not have been as straightforward as you thought. You've just become part of it. The queen's eyes never leave you as she speaks, her voice low, almost hypnotic. "The ritual," she says again, the word hanging between you like a dark promise, "will unlock everything. The power of the kings, the power of the gods, the power to transcend death itself." The text speaks of how to commune with the spirits of the earth, to harness the very forces of nature. We will become something more than mortal. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. You've heard stories, whispers of kings who sought immortality, rulers who defied death. But they always seemed like myth, legends told by firelight, meant to frighten children or inspire awe. Now, you're faced with the grim reality that what was once thought of as a myth might actually be possible. The queen's desire for power doesn't just extend to her kingdom, it reaches far beyond it, to something darker, more dangerous. But you can't. You finally manage to say, your voice weak, tremulous. Such power, it would destroy you. She smiles, but it's not a reassuring smile. It's the smile of someone who's already made up her mind. "That's what the scribes of old believed too," she says, her tone cold. That the pursuit of immortality came with a cost. But they were wrong. They were afraid. I am not afraid. A chill runs down your spine. You want to argue, to protest, to say that this is madness, but you know the truth. There's no room for doubt anymore. The queen has already crossed that line. She's no longer the ruler you once knew. She's something else, something that feels beyond human. "You've unlocked the path," she repeats. "You've transcribed the knowledge. Now, you will help me perform the ritual. I need your skills, your precision." The ritual requires a scribe, a special scribe, one who can transcribe not just words, but the very essence of the ritual. You, my loyal scribe, are the key to bringing this power to life. You feel sick, a cold sweat breaking out across your forehead. You've spent your entire life transcribing texts, ensuring that every word is perfect, every symbol flawless. But this is something else. This is not just about words. This is about life and death, about power beyond comprehension. And the queen is asking you to help her bring it into the world. Historians still argue whether the ancient kings who sought immortality were motivated by fear or greed. Some believe they sought power over death to protect their legacies. Others claim it was an act of pure hubris. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. But you're no longer concerned with ancient debates. You're focused on the queen and the role you've been forced into. "You will not fail me," she says, her voice no longer soft, but commanding. "You will write, and I will become what the kings could not, something eternal, something beyond the reach of time itself." You nod, but inside, the dread is growing. You've always been a quiet observer of history, a scribe who records the past without getting involved. But now, you are at the heart of something that could change the course of the future, something that may never be undone. You've always heard the saying, "The pen is mightier than the sword." But what happens when the pen is used to wield power over life and death? You're about to find out. The next few days are a blur. The queen's commands are precise, her expectations unbearable. She orders you to prepare everything: the ink, the parchment, the sacred items required for the ritual. There are symbols to be drawn, ancient prayers to be recited, and sacrifices to be made. You work without rest, your eyes growing heavy, your hands trembling from exhaustion. But you know you can't stop. You've already crossed this line, and there's no turning back. The scriptorium is transformed into a strange, almost otherworldly place. Candles flicker in the dim light, casting long, trembling shadows on the walls. The air smells of incense, thick and cloying. You've never seen anything like this before, rituals of power and death, veiled in secrecy. As the days pass, you find yourself growing more and more consumed by the task at hand. The ritual requires more than just your skill as a scribe. It demands everything: your focus, your will, your very soul. One evening, as you finish the final steps of preparation, you pause. The ritual is almost ready. The queen stands before you, her eyes glowing with an intensity you've never seen. "Tonight," she says, her voice steady, "we will transcend. We will become gods." There's a finality in her words, a certainty that sends a shiver through your body. You've done everything she's asked, but now you realize just how far you've gone. You've been part of something much bigger than yourself, a force of power, ambition, and destiny. You've helped her unlock the path, and now you will help her walk it. As the candles flicker low, the queen turns to face you. "It is time," she says softly, and with that, you feel your role as a simple scribe dissolve. You are no longer just recording history. You are part of its unfolding. Historians will argue for centuries whether this moment was inevitable, whether the queen's ambition was simply a reflection of the ancient desires of kings who sought immortality. But for you, the question is no longer academic. It is real, and the price of history will soon be paid. The queen stands before you, her figure illuminated by the flickering candlelight, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone walls. Her gaze is fixed on you, and for the first time, you feel the weight of her ambition pressing down on you. You've crossed a line. There's no turning back now, no escaping what's to come. You are not merely a spectator, but a participant in a ritual that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The air is thick with incense, heavy and suffocating. The scent is intoxicating, and your thoughts feel muddled, like the smoke itself is clouding your mind. The queen's voice pierces through the haze, calm and commanding. "It begins now, scribe. You will transcribe the final words. Every letter must be perfect." You nod, your hands trembling as you take up the quill. The ink feels strangely warm as it touches the parchment. This time, it is not just the transcription of an ancient text you are creating. This is something different. This is a new chapter in the story of your kingdom, a story that could end in unimaginable power or unspeakable destruction. The queen's eyes never leave you as she watches you write, her anticipation palpable. The chamber is filled with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the sound of your quill scratching the surface of the page. The words flow from your hand, but they feel foreign, as though they have a life of their own. Each stroke is deliberate, calculated, as though the ink is not just a medium, but a conduit for something far more dangerous. The ritual requires you to write in a language that is older than anything you've known. It's a language of power, a language that humankind was never meant to speak. Historians have long debated its origins. Some claim it was the language of the gods, spoken by kings who ruled not just over men, but over the very forces of nature. Others suggest it is a forgotten tongue, buried deep in the ruins of Aksum, its power dormant until now. But what matters now is that you're writing it. And with each word you transcribe, you feel something shift inside you. The queen is watching you closely, her face a mask of intense concentration. "You must keep writing," she insists. "Every word is a key. Every letter unlocks the next part of the ritual." You feel your heart pounding in your chest as you write, the sweat on your brow cold despite the warmth of the chamber. The room seems to close in around you, the walls narrowing as if they are conspiring to trap you in this moment. You can feel the weight of the Queen's gaze on you, her expectation, her hunger for the power she believes is within her grasp. The symbols on the page begin to shimmer, as though they are alive, reacting to the ritual you are performing. It's a sensation unlike anything you've ever experienced. The ink seems to pulse, to writhe, as if the words are trying to break free of the parchment itself. You wonder, for a brief moment, if you are losing your mind. But you push the thought aside. This is no time for doubt. This is the culmination of everything you've worked for, everything you've transcribed, every page you've turned, every letter you've written. This is what you were born to do. The Queen steps closer, her voice a whisper now, as though she is afraid to disturb the delicate balance of the ritual. "The final word," she breathes. "Write it. The final word. It's the word that will bind everything together. It's the key to unlocking the power of the gods, the power to transcend death, the power to rule not just over men, but over the very forces of nature. It's the word that will transform the Queen into something more, something beyond mortal comprehension." Your hand hesitates over the parchment for just a moment. You know what this word is. You've seen it in the ancient texts, in the scrolls that have been passed down through generations of scribes. It is the word that kings have sought for centuries. It is the word that promises immortality. And yet, as your quill hovers over the paper, a voice in the back of your mind screams at you to stop. This is not the way. This is not the path you were meant to follow. You've already written enough. You've already crossed too many lines. You should destroy the manuscript, burn it, scatter the ashes to the winds. But you know deep down that you can't. You can't stop now. Not when you've come this far. You take a deep breath and write the final word. The room trembles, ever so slightly, and the air crackles with a strange energy. You feel a sudden, overwhelming rush, as though the very ground beneath you is shifting, as though the world itself is changing. The candlelight flickers, casting eerie shadows on the walls. You look up at the Queen, and in her eyes, you see something that wasn't there before, something dark, something ancient, something otherworldly. Her lips curl into a smile, but it's not a smile of triumph. It's a smile that sends a chill racing down your spine. The ritual is complete. The power is hers. And now there is no going back. The walls of the chamber seem to pulse with a strange energy, as though the very stone is alive. You hear a sound, distant at first, but growing louder. It's the sound of chanting voices rising in unison, calling out in a language that you cannot understand, but that chills you to the bone. The air grows colder, and you feel a pressure building around you, as though something is trying to break through. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stops. The room falls silent. You look up at the Queen, your heart racing, and you see that her eyes are glowing, glowing with an unnatural light, a light that seems to be drawing all the warmth from the room. "Now," she says softly, her voice almost a whisper, "now I am what the kings could never be." And in that moment, you realize the truth. The Queen is no longer just a ruler. She has become something else, something beyond human, something that no one can control. Historians will debate the exact moment when the Queen crossed the line, when she became more than mortal. Some will say it was in this very chamber, when the final word was written. Others will argue that it happened long before, when she first began her search for immortality, when she first sought the power of the gods. But you know the truth. You were there. You saw it happen. The Queen has transcended, and there is no turning back. The queen stands before you, her form bathed in the eerie glow of the candles. Her eyes are no longer just the eyes of a ruler, they are something else, something that seems to pierce straight through you, something vast and unfathomable. She is no longer the woman who commanded respect in her court. She is something older, something more ancient, something that defies the very nature of mortality. You step back, your heart pounding in your chest. The air around you is thick with the strange energy that now surrounds her. The walls seem to hum, vibrating with a frequency you can almost feel in your bones. There is a sensation of the world bending, warping, as though the laws of nature no longer apply. The power she has unlocked, the power she has harnessed, is immense, immeasurable, and it is now hers. Do you see, Scribe? She says, her voice no longer just a voice. It is the voice of the earth, the voice of the wind, the voice of the gods themselves. Do you see what I have become? This power, it is beyond even the greatest kings of history. It is beyond death itself. You open your mouth to speak, but the words catch in your throat. You want to say something, anything, but you are paralyzed by the sight of her transformation. There is no longer any trace of the mortal woman you once knew. She has transcended into something else entirely. She has become a god. The chamber feels colder now, and you shiver despite yourself. The air is so heavy, it's as though the weight of centuries of history has descended upon you. You think of the texts you've transcribed over the years, the kings and queens, the rituals, the incantations, but none of it feels real anymore. None of it compares to what you are witnessing. Historians will argue for generations over whether the queen's power was a result of her ambition or whether it was the culmination of ancient rites that had been lost to time. But you know the truth now. She has surpassed what any mortal could ever become. She is something that no one, not even the gods themselves, could have foreseen. What will you do now? You ask, your voice trembling. Her smile is a strange one, enigmatic, as though she knows something you don't. Now, Scribe, I will reshape the world. I will bend it to my will. I will become more than a queen. I will become a force that no one can challenge. The power I possess will echo through the ages. I will transcend not just this life, but every life, every realm. The gods themselves will bow to me. You feel a knot form in your stomach. You realize the truth of her words. This is not just about ruling her kingdom. This is about rewriting the very fabric of existence. She intends to change everything, to alter the course of history, to claim dominion over life and death itself. And you are the one who helped bring this into being. What about the people? You ask, almost in a whisper. What about those who will be affected by this power? Her gaze softens, just for a moment. They will be part of the new world I create, she says. In this new world, there will be no death, no suffering. Only those who serve me will survive. The rest, well, they will fade away, as all things must. History is written by those who have the power to shape it. And I will be the one to write it now. A cold dread fills you, and for the first time, you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. You've always been a scribe, a recorder of history, but you never imagined you would become part of the history you transcribed. You never imagined you would be complicit in the creation of something so powerful, so dangerous. The queen turns away from you, her back straight and regal, her hands raised as though she is already ruling over something vast. The air seems to bend around her, a force unlike anything you've ever felt before. You realize, with a sudden and profound clarity, that the world you once knew is gone. It is being rewritten right before your eyes. Go, she says without turning. There is nothing more for you here. You have done your part. You have written the final chapter. You stand there for a moment, unsure of what to do. You want to flee, to run as far away from this place as you can. But you know it's pointless. The world has already shifted, and there is nowhere to run. The power she has unlocked is far-reaching. It will affect everyone, everything. There is no escaping it. And so, you turn and leave the chamber. You walk through the corridors of the palace, your steps slow and heavy, as if the weight of what you've just witnessed is pressing down on you. You pass by familiar walls, familiar doorways, but they no longer feel the same. Everything feels distant now, like you are walking in someone else's dream. The world is no longer what it once was. It has changed, and you were there to witness it. Historians will one day look back on this moment as the beginning of a new era. They will debate what truly happened in that chamber, whether the queen's power was a result of the ancient ritual or whether it was something more. But you will know the truth. You were there. You were the one who transcribed the words that unlocked the queen's power, the one who helped her transcend the boundaries of mortality. As you leave the palace and step into the night air, you look up at the stars above. They seem dimmer now, as though the light that once guided you has faded away. You realize that the world is no longer the same. The queen has become something beyond mortal comprehension, and the fate of all those who follow her will be shaped by the power she now holds. And you, the humble scribe, have played your part in this new chapter of history. You have witnessed the rise of something far greater than anything you could have imagined. You have helped create a new world, one where the boundaries of life and death are no longer what they once were. The stars above flicker, and for a brief moment, you wonder if they, too, are fading away, giving way to a new, darker light.